Hello, welcome to Showboys. My name is Mike. We have a really fun episode planned for you guys tonight. We are joined by filmmaker, documentarian, American Gladiator super fan, Ben Berman. Actually, I don't know if you actually are an American Gladiator super fan, but
I'm not.
no.
I just make documentaries.
Yeah. But yeah, we're glad that you're here with us today. We want to talk a little bit about the 30 for 30 on the American Gladiators, some of your other work, and just kind of get to know Ben Berman. So thank you again for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me. I'm just waking up from a nap. I had a very nice little nap just moments ago. I should have woken up a little bit ahead of time.
No, not around here. We all roll in really close.
Yeah. Where are you guys located?
We're up in Northeast Ohio, so it's 9 o'clock, brisk,
smoky.
9 o'clock tonight. Actually, yeah, pretty smoky. We got the Canadian wildfire smoke rolling in the last couple days.
Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah. But yeah,
man.
Nick, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I actually came prepared. I watched the American Gladiator documentary, both parts. Never opened the ESPN app before. I did for this.
Oh wow! Hell yeah!
That was an unpleasant experience. That app is not easy to use.
ESPN Plus. I'll tell you what. I recently got the Disney bundle, so I could watch ESPN Plus, and I was waiting to get Disney Plus anyway. But yeah, it was pretty fucking difficult to sync things up and get my Hulu and my Disney all worked out. So yeah, but I'm happy you eventually got there and you got to see the doc.
Yeah, there's only one device I would remember where I left off on. Everywhere else I watched it, I had to start from scratch each time. And I was like, come on, just remember it. Same account, whatever.
So you're saying you should be really familiar with both parts as we, go over it tonight with Ben.
Yeah, I've rewatched part 2. I definitely rewatched a few minutes throughout for sure.
Cool.
Part two is the better part in my opinion. So
thank you. God damn, I don't know what's been going on. The world's been going crazy. I always thought that part 2 is the more fun, subversive, weird, or I don't know, deeper kind of part between the two parts. And I go on Twitter and I check out what people are saying and Letterboxd reviews, and a lot of people are like, yeah, part 1 was actually pretty good, part 2 sucked. But now everyone's jumping. I don't know if you guys know about the Netflix.
Yeah, I saw that.
Everyone's all the dopes are jumping ship over to that one, being like, that one's the good one. So, it's
we're gonna combat that tonight.
No, it's fine. It is what it is, and people have different opinions. We're not gonna. If you have to be convinced to like the ESPN one over the Netflix one, or like part 1 over part 2, it's wasted. It's wasted breath.
You didn't get it.
They can don't like what they don't like, and I won't lose sleep over it.
Yeah. So I guess a good place to get started would be how this project even came to be. How did you end up making a 2-part documentary on the American Gladiators?
It started with someone from Vice reaching out to me before the pandemic, I'm pretty sure, just saying, hey, we're thinking about doing a documentary about American Gladiators. And I remembered I used to watch American Gladiators when I was a kid, and clearly remembered it. But I was like, I'm not interested in just doing a straight up nostalgia doc, but let me look into it, see if there's something there, see if there's an actual story that could be interesting. And very quickly, I kind of found a couple things that were really kind of interesting to me that mainly dealt with the weirdness and the secrecy of the origin story and who is this Dan Carr guy, and why does Johnny, the creator of the show, creator of American Gladiators, why is he so vocal about us never being able to interview Dan Carr? So I was like, there's something here. Let's find out,
I'm sure you probably don't remember the tweet, but like as soon as I finished part 2, I was like, I have so many questions that I could ask Ben. And well, here we are. That's kind of how this whole thing started. But yeah, like you ended up telling a story that I didn't even realize I wanted to hear. And something totally different than what I expected when I came into the documentary. I was just thinking we're gonna get some cool like behind the curtain things on the gladiators themselves, and then we get this like absolutely wild origin story with these two larger than life people in Dan and Johnny. And is Johnny like, is he really like that, like in person, and your like day-to-day interactions with him? Is he really like that surreal?
That's surreal. Well, I don't know necessarily surreal. Like he's. I think he's. All my interactions with him, while we were filming, not while we were filming, is basically, I think, what you see in the documentary. I read the other day he's upset with his portrayal. Which maybe there's validity to that. I don't see that. I see like a mirror, like.
Well, that's what I really.
People are upset with. I'm upset. Like if I look at myself and I like in the mirror and I'm like fat, like, and I see myself as fat, I'm like, fuck you. I don't like that image. But it's like I'm really the fat guy.
He's
like,
blaming the mirror.
Huh?
He's blaming the mirror. He just held up the mirror.
Yeah, to some degree. And of course, like we editorialize and we like, make something a little funnier, make something a little sadder with music and all that stuff. But yeah, I think to answer your question, I can't speak to the surreal phrasing, but yeah, Johnny, in my assessment, me and a number of people made the movie. It's like in our assessment, it's what you see is what you get. And it's like, I think it's accurate. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, that's what I liked about the way you approach this documentary, because like you said, it's not a nostalgia trip, right? And the first part I really felt was like catching me up on what this is, like the American Gladiators. But the second part was totally just a discovery tour of like all the weird stuff that happens behind it. And I don't feel like there was a lot of opinion, right, from you or anyone else that made it. Like it very much was like you guys were just kind of finding stuff and you just kind of put it together. Like there's very rarely you guys were like, this is the spin that we think is true.
In the first part, you're saying?
Second part.
Oh, in the second part. Yeah. To some degree. But then again, like, what is a film? What is a film without a director's opinion or a director's like point of view or, voice? So I'd like to think that my voice and my point of view is in part 2, like it's nothing is completely like the most like true to form or whatever is like, the most verite you could do, the most like just observational thing where there is no voiceover, there is no editing, it's just like raw footage, whatever. But so everything's got a bit of a spin. I do think that part 2, I can't like think of every moment right now, but yeah, it's pretty, I think, honest and true to what we encountered
right
when we were there. I don't know, it probably doesn't matter, but like a number of Thunder from part 1, the Gladiator Thunder, who in part 1 we see him in roughly modern day, and he's pretty debilitated. His like, he's with a walker and all that stuff. And, we literally were invited to his house in North Carolina, and we were a documentary crew. We brought cameras and we filmed. They knowingly were filmed. His wife and him knowingly were filmed, gave us a tour of his whole, house and whatever it is, farm. And I some of his wife and some of his friends were very upset with our portrayal of Thunder. His name's Billy, but it's like I'm very sympathetic and empathetic to the fact that he was suffering and he passed away since the movie. But like portrayal, it's the mirror thing again. We filmed him, and there were that we used the footage that like we filmed of him. It's just I don't know. I think subjects of docs and of everything bring their own shit to things, and I bring my own shit to making a movie. And I don't know, maybe I have a more of an appetite for sadness or whatever than others, and emotionality and broken sad people, because aren't we all broken sad people? But anyway, part 2 is I think it's all pretty darn as truthful as I could be.
Yeah, I like before you jumped in, Nick and I were talking, and he made a good point where part 1 seems like from Johnny's point of view, like what he wants everyone to see the show as, and then part 2 is like, this is really what is going on. So that was pretty neat. Since you brought up Thunder, were there or did any of the Gladiators stories as people like impact you during the filming of this? Was there anyone that really stuck out, or how was that experience getting to know these guys and girls?
Yeah, for sure. Things impacted me and some of the crew. Not in any way, not in like any way that made me lose sleep necessarily, but in a way that it's like, wow, this really is, what a fascinating life, what a fascinating person, not character, not subject, what a fascinating, endearing person, Darren McBee, whose Malibu is, and Red Williams, me and him became pretty darn close. And I really like the people the Gladiators that we had. And I remember, interviewing Mike Horton, Gemini, and man, like what a, like, such an older, or such an, how do I say it? I don't know. He's just been around, and he's such a man, and like to see him break down so often about his family, like he such a great guy. But yeah, really had some like, he was haunted still by some of this stuff that he experienced with the Gladiators 30 years ago. Just really fascinating, I think. And I will say, like, if you remember Bob Levy, the director, he appears in part 1.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a cautionary tale maybe in him for me personally, because I'm a Jewish director living in Hollywood, and he is and was a Jewish director living in Hollywood, and he's, he lives in this beautiful kind of Hollywood mansion or nice house, and his career, like he doesn't work anymore, and he's just kind of hanging out around his house being like, man, I wish I could work. And he doesn't really look like he's got much of a family. So it's like work can drive you in a direction that will, when you're 70 something, leave you alone and suffering. So I don't know.
Alone in Hollywood,
having made money, but like then you're just fucking old and crazy, and that's where I'm heading. So I'm looking to not do that.
Right.
Ugly Kid Joe Cross at 553 wrote, if Ben Berman has taught me anything, it is that I am a piece of shit. Now, I'd like to think that's a reference to something, a short film of mine that I made, but is it not? Can Ugly Kid Joe Cross chime in and let us know if that is
He better.
a reference to what I think it might be.
Yes, Joe, come on, let him know.
We can keep on talking until he.
Yeah, I was, and I'm the, I really like that. I mean, obviously a lot of documentaries work like that, but seeing inside these people's homes and how much that changes between each one, and then obviously the ones that didn't want that, preferably John said that he didn't want you guys in the house. Is it most definitely what you're thinking it is?
Well, he said most definitely. So, but
he's inside your mind right now, Ben.
You feel fat. I know. See, this guy gets it. I made a short film called "How to Lose Weight in 4 Easy Steps," which, there's a repeated line from the main character who basically calls himself a piece of shit. You're a piece of shit. I'm a piece of shit. So good work, Ugly Kid Joe Cross. Thank you. I do need to work out. Okay. Anyway, sorry guys.
No, you're good.
Hey, don't we all?
I was gonna ask, like, who was the most like intense person to interview? Like, which one was the most not intimidating, or like whichever one was the most intense, whatever the emotion might be.
Man, everyone in their own way. But you want to say Johnny. I think overall, in the grand scheme of the project, Johnny was the most intense because that guy, his batteries don't run out, man. Like and I was not even talking with him on a daily basis, or like I made sure that like someone at Vice, someone at the studio or the production company, like was Johnny's handler, because I had made one documentary before and I know how much a main subject, a person that you're making a doc on like needs, and they get angry at you and they need you to be nice and like for years. So it's like I was like, you handle Johnny any which way. But even with me not like being his main handler, it was still taxing and intense for sure.
Did he try to co-direct like with you?
Well, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
I love how you included. I was listening earlier to your appearance on the Handheld podcast, and how you guys were talking about like kind of how you cut this, you edited it with the background negotiations and like talks that you typically don't see included in the documentary. How you just peel the curtain back, and you do that. You did that too in The Amazing Jonathan, which I want to talk to you about that too, because that was another really fascinating documentary. But
thank you.
Yeah, those parts were great, and you could totally get that vibe where he's like, "No, Ben, you got to do this. You got to do this. I want to do this." Is that like normal?
I don't know, man. For me, I've made 2 documentaries so far, and both main subjects were like difficult and controlling, and and in both I used like phone recordings of them like telling me what they wanted to do, what I can have, what I can't have, and all that stuff to make a point of their kind of controlling personalities. It's normal so far, and I don't want it to be normal. But I think it is.
It's trendy.
It's just like I think a certain type of person allows documentaries to be done on them, and everyone wants to come out looking like they want to come out, regardless of if it's truthful, regardless if they even think it's truthful. But yeah, no, it is kind of fun and nice to mine stuff that isn't normally used in the actual project itself to help tell the story or help illustrate the character, the subject.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like documentaries for me are always happening, not even when a camera's on. I don't know why people think like I can be a dick to you or I can do X to you like 4 days before we're in the studio and filming. But like when we're filming, I'm going to be very nice because like that's what you're going to use. Like we're always watching, like, so, I don't know. Like you're not just you in front of a camera. You're always you.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, one of the things that really pulled me in right away was just like the presentation, the stylization, I guess, of the documentary, how it was edited and pieced together, and it kind of stands out among a lot of other documentaries. And I just wanted to let you know that that was something that I greatly appreciated, and I hope I hope that's something that continues to stay with all of your projects. It's just, I don't know, it's good. How much did your time, editing on Tim and Eric, like, play into different techniques and things that you used with these two docs?
I think in reality, plenty, but not like in anything too specific. It's not like the Tim and Eric editing of like hyper, like, is used much or at all in either of these docs. But it's, I think my past editing and especially, in the Tim and Eric world, I think gave me confidence and like a roadmap regarding what an editor is and maybe should be, and what an editor in my assessment isn't, and what, like, just like Tim and Eric as directors, like, are, they're very idiosyncratic. A Tim and Eric thing when you see it. I don't know, I think just coming up in that world showed me that you can make something very specific. You can make it very quickly if you want to or need to. And like, you don't have to always second guess yourself. Just like the first idea, the first cut might end up being really good. And the thing that, like, screens, is projected at Sundance or something. In my experience, having worked with some other people at this point, not just on the Gladiators project, but throughout time, is like, not everyone is able to just kind of pinpoint what this scene is, kind of like the presentation, what it's supposed to be, what it feels nice as, or intentionally opposite, like doesn't feel nice, and like the meaning of it. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily completely answering your question, but yeah, I think, a little Tim and Eric quality, or a little like weird Adult Swimmy, funny humor, mixed with like some really kind of sad, dark, or emotional moments. Like, that's my MO, like, to go from something very funny like Bob Levy burping to, Malibu talking about his wife dying, and sometimes, especially in the Jonathan doc, like seconds from each other, and somehow it works.
Yeah.
I'm proud.
And maybe that's what's most jarring for people when they watch part one, then part two, and they think part two sucks, is because where you do that maybe within seconds in that doc, but then also just in general, the whole pacing, the two halves is also like that. Is, to me, the like the first half one is like the more glamorous portrayal of it, the more informational version of it, and then the part two is like, this is like super real. There's like people issues, there are just personalities, there's decades of relationships like unraveling here. And Dan Carr, like, when you finally interviewed him, like, it really put into perspective that, like, these are just people, and like, these are two dudes who've had a relationship for decades, and these issues are far beyond like what anyone can put like a single pin in and say, this is it, like, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. And I thought that was like the really cool part of all that.
Thank you. Yeah. No, the whole heroes and villains thing, and like, in reference, in my mind, it was clearly in reference to like Johnny and Dan, but there is no clear, Johnny is not a villain, and Dan is not the hero, and everyone does everything wrong, and everyone is like also just trying to do their best, and like, we all make mistakes, and I don't know, but I love the fact that we were able to make that comment through Hollywood screenwriter, the Peter Iliff guy who wrote the Hollywood script, the American Gladiator script. I don't know. It's just stuff like that. I like. I also clearly like, and I got to probably chill out on this. Like, what is it? Like story. Like sometimes allowing the documentary to dip into being somewhat self-aware and talking about that, how stories are told. The fact that like Johnny is at that point definitely being portrayed as a villain through Dan Carr's writing and our recreations of Dan Carr's writing. Like I want to help the audience also understand like that this is a movie. It might not be, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like being somewhat self-referential is sometimes a nice way to tell the audience, like, don't take everything for exact fact. Like, this is a story. And I don't know, just like think about that. This is not just like, this is not absolute accurate fact. Or I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I like the Iliff section. I'll end with that. There's something refreshing, and like it does double duty or something, that scene. It talks about the form and it talks about the story at hand, and I appreciate that.
So Dan's come up now, so can we get down, are you able to say like why Johnny didn't want Dan involved?
Well, I can speculate, but I think maybe it's better to hear from you guys if you want to talk about it. Let's see what you guys, what thoughts, what assessment you guys have, because it's probably correct.
The way I took that was, especially how I can kind of see it from a realistic, just a people perspective, right? Like Johnny was worried, right, constantly about this image that he's trying to uphold, and Dan's like kind of this wild card that has kind of been like in his shadow this whole time for one reason or another. That's kind of like this haunting factor that he's constantly worried about, as someone who wants that image maintained. So for him, it was probably just easier to be like, yeah, just don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about Dan. But then once you kind of like broke open that veil, and he's kind of okay with it. Okay, cool. Like everything's okay. I guess it's kind of like the friend that you had a fight with and you don't want to like talk about it for decades, and all of a sudden you're like, that wasn't so bad. Just let it happen. He's too controlling, right? And it was actually, he was making a big deal out of what was otherwise nothing being 30, 40 years later, right? Like,
there's a world. There is a world. I'm not saying it's a big world, but there's a possibility that if Johnny at the beginning of this production and us dealing with him was like, as you can see in the credits of the show, I've got a co-creator. You should interview him too. Like if he did that, we would have like interviewed Dan Carr probably eventually. And Dan would have like probably been like, yeah, no, me and Johnny did this thing together and I'm grateful. Like I think Johnny made it way worse for himself, but that's telling. I think in reality, like, it's present in Dan Carr's writing in his book, that in Dan Carr's assessment, and Johnny knows this because Johnny was aware of the fact that this book existed in 2008, that like, he was aware that Dan felt that he was slighted and like left in, like Johnny took the idea and ran with it and made money, and he didn't. And Dan Carr has been vocal in the past. So Johnny, I think, was worried about us. If we got to talk to Dan just spilling the beans and questioning Johnny's character and how he operated. So the amount that Johnny protested Dan Carr being in this documentary was the very thing that led me to Dan Carr, because I was like, something's going on here.
How far in the process was it that you guys finally, like, one, found Dan, and two, convinced Johnny to let you include that into the doc?
Well, it wasn't like how are we going to find Dan? We always knew that he was in Florida, but it was the fact that we were contractually not allowed to reach out to Dan. Or basically all that to say, in Johnny's deal with Vice, he put in it that in order for us to get an interview with Dan, Johnny would have to grant us an interview with Dan, and he wasn't doing that. So it was quite a little while until I think Johnny was kind of forced. He kind of put his own back up against a wall. We were like going to Erie to film Johnny and to, basically in Johnny's assessment, film Johnny and film his mom at his house and all that stuff. And so, yeah, something happened. Basically, there was kind of partially like we did that news piece that airs towards the end of part 2. And also Johnny was like starting to hear, like Dan Carr was aware that there was an American Gladiators documentary. And for a long while, like no one reached out to him to do an interview because we couldn't. So Dan Carr kept on asking Johnny, like, when are they going to film me? When are they going to film me? And then when we were going to Erie, I think that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, where Johnny like suddenly was getting pressure from the people of Erie, like, when are you going to interview Dan? When are you going to interview Dan? And then Johnny basically had to decide if he was going to tell Dan you're not going to be interviewed and like face why, or risk Dan talking in the documentary. So like, so Johnny put himself in a precarious situation that that was the only way out, was to give us Dan.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You caught me in the doc. I was very shocked when he showed up on screen actually there towards the end. I was like, oh dang, they actually did it.
Yeah.
It's great to see him sit down into frame, and especially with the outfit he's wearing is like, that's just great. It's just great that he chose to wear that shirt.
Yeah, and John, just for over nothing really, maybe something, but over his own paranoia, just built up a real sense of like there was something more going on, but really there probably really wasn't.
No, wait, there's there for them, for Johnny Ferrara and Dan Carr, there's tons going on. There's decades of deceit. There is blatant lying. There's friends, like, friends in their 20s or 30s deceiving, stealing, rich white man stealing a Native American man's idea, his property. Like, there's everything in that. Dan Carr still to this day lives an extremely meager existence. Now, is Johnny's money that he has now, is it mainly from American Gladiators? I don't know. I don't think so. Is it from family money? Maybe. I don't know. But no, there's tons baked into over the decades of the story between them. So for Johnny, and let's be honest, I also think it's pride and it's ego. Everyone wants to, like, have the attention on themselves, and Johnny clearly isn't looking, and for good reason and for absolutely bad reason, to share the spotlight with Dan. American Gladiators, in my assessment, would never have existed if not for Dan Carr. There would be no words American Gladiators. There would not be tough men competing against each other and women. Right. And if it wasn't for Johnny Ferraro being this businessman, this pitch guy, American Gladiators would have died in Erie in the 80s, so you needed both of them to do the thing.
For sure.
Now the thing is available in a 5-part doc series on Netflix.
Darn. Oh, is it the same length though? Because you got what, 3 hours?
Yeah, 3 hours.
I think theirs is a little bit longer.
Solid 3 hours too. I mean, like, it's good. It's a good 3 hours.
Thank you. I think theirs is 4 something. I watched it all yesterday, and I left not because of the content or the quality or whatever, but maybe I left feeling like fucking drunk. I ever watched 5 hours of one subject matter in one day. I spread it out over the course of the day, but
couple naps.
Yeah, the nap before the show today.
What's that?
Said hence the nap before the show today.
Yeah, I'm just
need to catch up.
I'm sleeping. I'm sleeping away the pain.
So John, had a deal with Vice to get this documentary done. What's the situation with the Netflix one? Dan? No, just kidding.
Yeah.
At one point, Johnny was worried that the Netflix project was trying to get Dan Carr, but I don't think that was ever a real thing. My understanding is that like Nitro is a producer of the Netflix Gladiators doc, and like I think it kind of started with him approaching a production company in Canada, and then for a little while I was hearing like, oh, Mark Duplass is like, he came on to produce the Gladiator, the Netflix one, and then that went away, and then like I heard that the a couple producers came and went, or maybe that was just speculation, but yeah, no, I don't know. What can I say? A Nitro produced documentary about himself seems problematic to the documentary community, but the documentary community, I don't think is watching this. I don't think they're fucking watching my doc either. So, some docs work well. Some docs you waste 2.5, or you don't waste 2.5 years. You spend 2.5 years thinking you're making another Sundance, award-winning, respected doc, and then it's just like it comes out and some people are into it. Thanks for asking me to be on your podcast and liking it. And then a Netflix project comes out 4 weeks later, and it's just like it's all content. It's all this stale, commercial content.
Yeah. So we found out in your doc that Gladiators kind of came to be during writer's strikes.
Yeah.
And cool we're in the midst of one currently.
Yeah.
So is there like a comeback?
There's gotta be. I really think there is.
And now we have 2 documentaries right off the backs of each other. It's got to be coming back.
It's got, the math is there. It would be crazy if American Gladiators wasn't reborn again on TV or some streamer or something.
I mean, Johnny's working his magic right now.
Absolutely. He's got to, and he's probably to us or to Vice and to whomever, like acting all upset about both documentaries and threatening to sue and all this shit.
Yeah.
If he's smart, and he is, he's thinking, okay, people are literally saying the words American Gladiators for the first time since 2009. So like, and there's a writer's strike, like, let's do this. Like, so hopefully he's using it to his own advantage. I encourage him to do that, because I think there's not a better time than now, But yeah, no, the fact that the writer's strike history exists, and especially it's terribly ironic because, American Gladiators was born out of these union ironworker picnics. It is just, I don't know, poetic injustice or whatever.
Yeah. A weird parallel there for sure.
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating that the doc came out during a writer's strike as well. So, yeah, man, workers and the fact, like, as you see in both documentaries, and is clearly accurate, like all the gladiators were getting like significantly exploited. They were getting low pay. They were getting injured. Mm-hmm. They were threatened with being replaced. It's just like, a boss and a worker, a management and the workforce is in America often, a difficult dynamic where the working class is exploited and chewed up and spat out. So the writers in Hollywood are experiencing sticking up for themselves. The Gladiators went on strike and stuck up for themselves, and it's an American tale. That's really like what made me interested in actually doing a doc about American Gladiators. It wasn't the subject matter at hand. It wasn't, Nitro and Ice and Malibu and Saber, even though I love a number of them. And it wasn't the nostalgia, like, go fuck yourselves. Like, we get nostalgia. We understand what that is. We don't need it. We don't need to lead with it and have that be the only thing we're here for. But yeah, to do a doc using American Gladiators to make a film about America, and I as I hear myself say that, that's fucking pretentious, but it's kind of what we did, and it's kind of the second layer, the deeper layer that, like, I think in projects that I do, it's, you got the small story, you got Amazing Jonathan, this magician comedian, but it's, you know, really about like mortality and dealing with mortality and death and truth and illusion and magic. It's like deeper stuff than just, remember that guy from the 80s and 90s who used to cut his arm open on stage, and remember the TV show American Gladiators, you know? But yeah, but what's under that, you know, I think.
Man,
how did you guys on the doc? Are you fans of American Gladiators? Are you just fans of me and 30 for 30? Or
yeah, what? I heard Ben Berman had a new project out, and no,
I wish some people might.
Hey,
Joe
now it may be now.
Now that I'm on your podcast, you'll check in with my career as it goes on, if it does.
No, I was just laying on the couch. I tend to frequent ESPN, and I was like, oh, American Gladiators doc. That sounds interesting.
He digs up all the stuff.
Yeah. All the stuff.
I pull all the weight around here, Ben. Pretty much is what Nick's saying. No. But you came up with a great segue there, because I did want to touch on the Amazing Jonathan, because I did run and watch that after I finished American Gladiators. And man, just your style of documentary is so good. It's so,
thank you.
It just pulls, or at least me, it pulls me in, like with like I said earlier, your editing and the presentation of it. But the story of Jonathan also is just hyper fascinating. And how did that one come about?
That one came about in a much different way than the Gladiators project, and was, from soup to nuts, was so different. And to be honest, the Jonathan doc was so much better of an experience for me. I think probably because I didn't have anything to compare it to in documentary. It was my first thing. But so basically, yeah, I in 2016 or so, I was like directing a pilot for Comedy Central. It's with a magician comedian whose name is Justin Willman, who's since had a show on Netflix called Magic for Humans, and he's hosted some shows and stuff. Very nice, friendly magic comedian, accessible, presentable guy. I was in the writer's room, visiting the writer's room one day when we were working on that pilot, and him and some of his other younger magician comedian writers were talking about the Amazing Jonathan, and they mentioned like he was addicted to some sort of drugs, and like he went to his doctor, and his doctor said, well, you better just keep on doing these drugs, because if you stop, your body wouldn't be able to like what's it called?
Handle the withdrawal.
Yeah, handle the withdrawal, and you die. So just keep on doing your drugs, which ended up not being a fact, just something Jonathan made up.
I was gonna say that was maybe like old medicine. Like, it's changed a lot when it comes to that stuff for the past 20 years. They've changed their thoughts on that. Just do more.
Of course, right. I also heard, I heard he was ill, he was dying, he was addicted to drugs, and he was like supposedly giving away some of his act to like younger magicians to like have his act live on. So that was enough. And I was familiar with the Amazing Jonathan when I was coming up as a kid from Comedy Central specials and stuff on TV. And I was like, oh, that could make for an interesting like 15-minute verite slice of life doc about this Vegas magician comedian facing his mortality with humor and whatever. And through Justin, I was able to reach out to Jonathan and then arrange a time to drive out to Vegas, just me and my buddy, John Roig. I was camera, he was the sound guy. And we like filmed for like 2 days with Jonathan very lightly. And And like within the first hour of filming Jonathan, just getting a tour of his house, that's when he like smoked meth in front of us. And I was thinking, I was like, dude, I'm a genius. Like I'm able to film this. Like how, like, no, it was just like, he just wanted to be shocking and show us him smoking meth, which wasn't like nothing happened anyway. But yeah, so one thing led to another. I just kept on like once a month I would go to Vegas, film for a weekend. And then 6 months into doing that, we were about to go on tour. He was about to mount a comeback because he hadn't died yet. He was given a diagnosis, or he was going to die, and he was given a year to live. But then 4 years later, he was still living, so he went back on tour. And then the twist happens, which it's been years out, and so it's no shock that Jonathan allowed another documentary crew of his life to film another documentary about him at the same time I was filming mine, and told me that they were the people that made Searching for Sugar Man and Man on Wire, these 2 Academy Award winning docs. So my documentary kind of shifts and opens up to include that story as well.
I think I cried laughing every edit where you're like, and another documentary. What was it, like 4 by the end of it?
Did any of them come out with their documentaries?
Yeah, in the Amazing Jonathan doc, towards the end, we go to the premiere of the second crew. And I'll not spoil that because that's
that was good.
I traveled around. I've done stuff. You know, it's fun to like. One okay thing about getting older and taking naps and feeling like you're getting fat is at least like checking up on like, oh man, I've done 2 documentaries. Now I've, you know, like, and just thinking about scenes from the Jonathan doc. And again, that experience was kind of so pure, and like the way that doc was made was just so small and so pure and like natural in a way. It wasn't always easy, but anyway, I don't know.
Sounds like a nature doc. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Fun to remember that years ago, me and a couple friends flew to Vancouver, not knowing what we were going to film, and then like filmed around the streets.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It's just fun thinking that.
So, your friend that makes an appearance in Jonathan, that is kind of like giving you the pep talk and stuff. Is that the same guy who shows up in the post-credit scene of?
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yes. That little post-credit scene made me laugh, and his scenes in Jonathan were pretty funny.
His scenes in Jonathan were kind of the best. Not only for me, just because I'm a fan of him and putting him in stuff of mine, and him giving me advice. His advice on and off camera is just always correct and funny and whatever. Having watched the Jonathan doc many times in many different screenings with different people, a lot of laughs come from John Dugas scenes. Needed to toss him into the Gladiators one, especially him when what he says in the Gladiators one is so accurate now more than ever. Like, what are you doing? Like, people are, what channel is this on?
People are gonna watch this.
Like, what? People are tuning in looking for sports, and you're giving them your search for truth of like who stole this idea and this Native American man, and you know, like
he only saw part 2.
Directors, like this is not just like sports and stats and like you know, I don't know. It's
hey, you were giving us the story we didn't know we needed.
That's what I appreciate that. I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't need the story.
but across the board, they just didn't need. One thing I did like also in the Jonathan doc was kind of you showing your love for filmmaking, like even as a child, and that the scenes, you know, with your dad and about your mom and all that stuff. It was really cool to see. So like, filmmaking's been a passion of yours for a long time.
For sure. I think when I was a child, I wouldn't call it like filmmaking or a passion. It's just like gravity or something. It's just like somehow I let cameras were my thing, and I could make little videos. Like that's it. So then, that grows as you get into junior high and you make little videos with your friends and music videos and stuff. But yeah, no, I've always gravitated towards cameras and making stuff, even not in video or filmmaking. Like I think as a kid, I always like drew and always like built little things. And still to this day, I there is a nice feeling about like building something, putting a little package together, making something feel a certain way, or seeing progress be made. I get really fucked up, and you could ask many of my teammates, especially on the Gladiators doc, the difficulties I have when I don't see progress getting made. I can lose my mind, because in the Tim and Eric world, where the way I made little videos when I was a kid, and then coming to Hollywood in a very non-Hollywood way, working with Tim and Eric, like we would just go out in the parking lot, shoot something, we would edit it together, and that's it. Like it's I don't know. But yes, to answer your question, always been into film and video and making things. What about you? What are is that a passion? Do you guys make stuff, or this podcast, is it specifically about talking about film projects?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we're both creative-minded people that enjoy that process you were talking about. Wow, this is awesome. Our interviewee is flipping the script and interviewing us. But yeah, that is exactly what you do. I expect this to be in your third documentary, by the way. You have all the rights to this clip here. No, yeah, we like to talk about shows, movies, games, all that stuff in between there. That's kind of how this came to be.
Yeah.
But man, I wasn't expected to get asked that. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely just we exercise our creative juices through the podcast, whatever it might be. So we like to surround ourselves with also creative people. So it's I guess our passion project, our hobby.
Apparently,
it's not our full-time job.
146 episodes of this, or we're in the midst of the 146. That's a lot, guys.
Of the Thursday episode.
It's been a while.
That's so many.
We were when the classic started out of the pandemic.
I mean, who doesn't have a podcast these days, right?
Right.
I mean, we felt left out, honestly. We just had to really
catch the wave,
get in, be a part of the crowd.
Yeah.
But enough about us. Let's talk about you. How did you get started
creating
in with Tim and Eric? Was that your first gig?
It was my first real job, and it was what I moved out to LA to do, and it had celebrities and cameras and stuff. But I went to Temple University in Philadelphia for film school, and after that, I tried to make a little bit of a run at being a sound person, sound mixer, recording person for video and film. And
I'm thinking of the boom mic right now.
I know it's it finally is motivated now.
Yeah,
I was just ripping off another filmmaker whose name is Nick Broomfield, who is known to have he makes great docs. British guy that is the sound guy and knocks on doors and tries to get answers and stuff, and very, very much what we were kind of aping. No. So Tim and Eric was absolutely my first real thing. Everything else was just freelance, and I was doing a terrible job at it. Coming out to LA, working with Tim and Eric was really great, and was completely crazy hands-on experience. And very quickly started editing some behind the scenes stuff, shooting behind the scenes doc stuff, and cutting that together, some promos and stuff, and got to do some stuff that a PA doesn't normally get to do 3 days after moving to LA, and then was able to keep doing it and building that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little sad that the boom mic didn't make an appearance tonight.
So I'm gonna go get
I brought it. Tim Heidecker has a talk show called Office Hours, and I had the headphones and the boom mic on that.
Oh yeah. I was doing a little homework this morning and found that video, and I got a good laugh out of that.
Give you some other prop. I used these on Doug Lucenhop, who he has got everyone does have a podcast.
I'm telling you.
Lucenhop, who's an old Tim and Eric editor, has a podcast with Brent Weinberg. What's Weinberg? Brent Weinberg? Weinberg. That doesn't sound right.
Weinstein?
Weinstein? That's a bad name.
Yeah, that's a bad name.
I think it's Weinberg? Anyway, this comedian Brent and what's it called? The Poundcast. And I was on that the other day and I wore these. So I'll give you a little bit of this.
Oh, nice. There we go.
There's no point in that.
Yeah. I mean, they look pretty rad. So was a documentarian always the goal, or that's just kind of something that you fell into and discovered that you actually like really enjoy doing?
Very good question. It wasn't always the goal, but at a fairly early age, like I saw a clip of Don't Look Back, D.A. Pennebaker's documentary about Bob Dylan in 1965 going on tour in the UK. And it's just like, it was the most raw. It wasn't a movie. Like as a kid, you would only have seen like movies like Indiana Jones or something. And then to see this artifact, this black and white, grainy, shaky thing, just looking like aiming a camera at this like very iconic musician that I was already like a fan of. I was like, what is this? Like, it's not pretty to look at. It's messy as fuck. Like, this must be art. And I was like, this is so long story short, I did certainly fall in love with documentary. Also, I think maybe when I was in high school, I don't know exactly when the American movie came out, when I first saw it, which is, I think is when it first came out. But I also fell in love with that. Very different thing. Have you guys seen American movie? Chris Smith's doc? If you haven't, go. American movie is pretty much, in my assessment, one of the best documentaries. If you like the Jonathan doc, I think you guys will like it. I think sensibility-wise, it's about this guy, Mark Borchardt. Where does he live? I want to say Milwaukee, maybe. In the winter, or it goes through many years, but he's this auteur filmmaker who's made films with his friends growing up, and like he's gonna make the American dream. He's gonna make his first horror feature in his hometown, and he's an incredible character, extremely endearing, extremely eloquent, but like just can't get it together. And it's very funny. It's very he's very passionate, and it's really, to me, inspiring. I watch it like once a year. Anyway, watch American Movie. Nice. But yes, I've always loved documentaries, especially like very raw verite docs. And I just happened to find myself thinking about shooting a short doc, the Jonathan short, that ended up being a long. And then that's how it happened. But yeah, love documentaries. But yeah, always probably when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be like Steven Spielberg or something like that.
Right.
Is that in the cards?
To be Steven Spielberg?
Well, maybe not be Steven Spielberg, but like
I think it would have happened if it's gonna I think there's like, I'd like to be maybe what's somewhat realistic, and someone I'd like to be is like a I blank on his name sometimes. The guy that did Florida Project. The guy that did Tangerine. The guy, we got to look it up. I follow him. Baker, not Clark Baker, something. Chris Baker, Sean Baker, great filmmaker, and he makes these like kind of small but really like auteur, kind of grimy movies that are really well made. And there's filmmakers out there that I think I could be parallels to them that do narrative. Sometimes, I don't think I'll ever just say like never any more documentaries, but I certainly, my experience, my history, my past is in narrative and comedy, and I've made some short films, one of which Ugly Kid Joe Cross pointed out is How to Lose Weight in 4 Easy Steps. But yeah, so I want to do narrative as well.
Nice.
Check out Sean Baker's stuff too. I'm giving you guys fucking
I'm gonna have so much stuff to watch after this.
Watch the Florida Project is in my assessment his best to date.
Okay.
Florida Project.
Clearly, there's a difference between those styles between a regular series or a movie and a documentary. But in your experience, like how different are they, and which one do you kind of? I mean, you've made 2 documentaries, but which one do you prefer?
What are the options?
Like making another documentary or going into the like narrative movie or series.
I want to. I should / I want to / I want to get my brain back into not only the creative but the like how to actually like produce and make a narrative film. And at this point, like I have to do a feature is probably like that is as much as the Amazing Jonathan doc was like my voice and my like, you can really feel that there's a filmmaker and hopefully you like what you're feeling from that.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to do in a narrative feature, and I've only done it in short so far. So that's a healthy goal or something to have in mind. But at the same time, like I see like, Spike Jonze will like do a short film or something. Like I have no judgment of short films. That's a great, viable, valuable art form.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll make a short as well.
Is there a story lurking in the back of your brain for a project like that, or is this just kind of something you want to do and you haven't gotten that far yet of brainstorming a narrative?
No, there's certainly one that's been floating around, kicking around, drafts of scripts of the last draft was maybe years ago, but yeah, there's certainly a world and an idea and a script for a feature that is, I think, still to this day my passion project. It deals with roughly assisted suicide, but in a me way.
Where it's like really happy, then really dark, like that.
Yeah. Where it's really happy and then really dark.
Okay. There we go.
My dog's
that sounds awesome.
So Joe Cross wants to audition.
For the someone
assisted suicide, I guess.
Someone suffocating.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Absolutely. Ugly Kid Joe Cross, I think you and me are going to be good friends. You're really good. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm horse_Berman. What are your viewers? How many viewers you guys got?
At least 3. We're just really raking in the views.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Can I tell a funny story real quick about our interactions on Twitter? Well, too bad, it's my podcast.
You got to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
The way this kind of like came together was so easy and quick that I seriously thought I was being catfished, and I was like,
you don't need to advertise that I'm like any fucking person.
Oh yeah, it cost a lot of money, but besides that, it was super easy and quick. But yeah, I was like, is this like, this couldn't have came together like that? Like,
I'm no Sean Baker. I'm no Spielberg.
Good point.
Everyone can get to me pretty easily. And if someone just says like, hey, I really liked your movie, would you do my podcast? The answer is going to be yes. And then someday I think I'll have gotten catfished and they'll be like, okay, we're recording or we're live now. Joke's on you. We actually didn't like your movie. We're team Netflix. And now we're going to berate you for a while.
Full circle. There we go.
Is there anything more to the story, or you just wanted to recount how?
No, I was just like,
I said,
yeah. I was like, I really hope I'm not getting catfished, but I wasn't. Here you are, great guy, following through.
Once he accepts the Google invite, it's
that's when it's it's official when the calendar invite gets accepted.
I usually don't accept those, so I'm happy I did that for you guys.
Oh, there you go. Got a Ben Berman exclusive there. But yeah, Nick, you got any more questions for our pal Ben here?
Jordan in the comments, he definitely made sure to ask you about. He said that you interviewed Weird Al somewhere in the documentary. Okay. He has interacted with Weird Al before, and he was just wondering, like how strange or interesting Weird Al is, obviously, like in person.
The question is, how weird is Weird Al?
Yeah,
absolutely not weird. He's
completely normal.
He's extremely. In my experience, the few times that I've interacted with him, he's extremely normal. And but his sensibility, like especially in a documentary interview, his sensibility is still very funny and dark, and like, he likes funny stuff like us. He likes. I remember him. Like he's like a fan and a friend of the State sketch comedy group and Stella and Tim and Eric. He was on Tim and Eric, so he likes good, funny, dark stuff. But somehow throughout the decades, he's managed to be so user-friendly and so accessible. It's still very funny, and will like every once in a while do something pretty dark and twisted. But he's always been, I don't know. So clearly someone needs to do a doc on Weird Al.
Himself. He needs to do the doc on himself. That's really the only way it would have to happen.
Yeah. I think it would just be a video blog at that point.
Yeah.
If you heard a fart, that wasn't me farting. That was literally me just doing it. Let the audience know.
Classic. Well, hey, thanks for clearing that up.
Of course.
Again, I don't want to eat up your whole evening. You're all energized, fresh off a nap. Like you got the whole rest of your night.
I'm finally awake now.
Yes. Which is odd because I've heard our podcast does the opposite and helps.
It's 10 p.m. your time.
Yeah. One thing we always ask our guests when they come on is what they're currently watching or playing. Are you watching or playing any games these days?
I'm not a game guy, but currently watching. I was watching a lot of the Netflix Gladiators.
I was just gonna say, you watched that.
No, I want to come up with a good answer. Well, I was all Succession, and that's over. That's nothing new. I tried to check out The Idol. That's fucking garbage. Dave was cool, but that's over now. I'm looking for my next good watch. So if you guys have anything to recommend, please do.
I always have to recommend Severance on Apple Plus.
Yeah,
I feel like not enough people are seeing that show.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I watched the first 2 episodes, and something kept me from continuing on. And I know some people involved in that show, and it's great. I don't know, it was a little too Scandinavian or something for me. It was a little or something, which I can usually handle that stuff. I don't know. I'll go back and watch it. And season 2, I think the writer strike shut them down.
Yeah,
they're going to come back hopefully, and so I'll check that out.
All right. Well, I think we got the quote of the episode, like a little too Scandinavian.
Scandinavian.
But hey, thank you again so much for coming on. It was a blast getting to talk and getting to know more about you. Thank you everyone who was here. Appreciate it. Make sure you go follow Ben on Twitter and Instagram. What was your handle again?
Wow, what a fucking face. Horse _ Berman. If you just look up Ben Berman, it should be there. I got a blue check mark on Instagram, so you know it's me.
There you go. And make sure you check out his work over on ESPN Plus. I think you can watch it on without having Plus. I'm not sure. Like Nick said, it's ESPN app is pretty confusing when you get to that part, but
it's busted.
It's also 30 for 30s are available on via Amazon. You can rent episodes or buy episodes of 30 for 30, so you can check out part 1 and part 2 of the American Gladiators doc via Amazon or at Amazon Plus, but that is a little complicated if you don't already have it. And if you have the Disney bundle, I think you can also watch on Hulu, but that's the platform that the Amazing Jonathan doc is on. Yes. Hulu and only Hulu.
Got to watch that too. That's a great one.
That's next.
But yes, thanks again. We'll let you get out of here. And if you're here watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week. So you guys have a good one. I don't even know what to do with my evening now.
I'm not Ben, if anyone was wondering.
Whoa, Ben, you look so different.